Believe it or not, Admiral Emery and his squadron went southeast to visit Queen Leokalani, and she was the last queen of Hawaii. And so it was nice of her to visit with the fleet, considering that she had been deposed by some businessmen. So this is just some pictures of the and as their present from Hawaii, they got pineapples. So this is Eugene Doyle that I just mentioned, that we have his scrapbook. And now the sailors lived a very rugged and frequently dangerous life on the ships, and I just wanted to talk briefly about their lives. They had normal day-to-day routines, drills and inspections, calisthenics. They had practice, and that's the gunnery, and that was pretty scary. I'm sure they didn't have any safety nets up there. And they still swabbed the deck. And here's another one. They were remarking that yesterday about coming out on the thing. And then they learned how to do all kinds of arts and making different things. And they slept when they could. And they learned to sew. But the worst job, it was not half bad for some of the sailors, but those who worked below deck it was just terrible. They were dominated by intense heat and coal dust. And one sailor commented that after working with the coal, he decided that hell couldn't be worse than this. But coal was the ship's only source of power. And they would pull up over to, they would do it every 2 weeks, and they would pull up next to a barge or a collier, and then all the coal would be dumped on the ships. And all deckhands would help, and then afterwards, if you can imagine, they were covered in head to toe with coal, then the whole ship had to be cleaned. How many have you taken place in a cartwheel race? I'm old enough to remember those, and three-legged races and things like that. That's what they did. They had fun doing that. Bobbing for apples, playing cards and checkers, boxing. And believe it or not, they had silent movies back then aboard the ship. And this one was so funny because one of the sailors said that they showed it about 50, the same one about 50 times. And this was one of the more famous ones, Perils of Pauline. And it was a film series, and he said they might show number 9 one day and then show number 47 the next, but he said they enjoyed it anyway. And quote unquote, he said Pauline was always in some kind of fix, getting thrown off cliffs and things like that. So I think the extracurricular activities were definitely earned by the sailors, wouldn't you say? So the next place they went was New Zealand, and they were greeted warmly. They had horse racing, and also the native New Zealanders, which were the Maori tribe. And then in Australia, they went to 3 different ports, Sydney, Melbourne, and Albany. And they really loved Australia. And apparently they loved it so much, there was a lot of sailors that decided to stay back. Here they had dancing aboard the ship. And apparently the females in Australia just loved the sailors, and so they had a lot of relationships. And it was so bad that when they were ready to leave, the USS Kearsarge had to go back and round up some of the sailors. And there was a lot of drama with the typhoon. And one of the sailors said all you could see was the trough, and the mast would go way down, and then the entire ship would go out of the way, out of sight. And another sailor recalled, it was really funny, this story. It was kind of like a fishtail, I would call it. But he said that, I'm going to tell you a story that you're just not going to believe. One of the sailors on our ship, in our squadron, was picked up and washed overboard by a huge wave. And then that same wave carried him over to another ship in another squadron and threw him back on deck. Now, obviously that could happen, I don't know. But there was one person that did die, and there was a lot of damage to some of the ships. So, and then some of the sailors that did go overboard were rescued by other ships. So that might be the reference to this story. Seeing the American anthem, My Country 'Tis Thee, Star Spangled Banner, and you can see they have the American flags and the Japanese flags, and the Japanese sailors visited their ships, and they sold souvenirs on the ships, and then of course they met friends too. And so it was a tremendous success. And Sperry wrote back and talked to Roosevelt and told him that it was very successful, and President Roosevelt was delighted. And in fact, on November 30th, 1908, the route to Kahiri agreement was signed, and they claim it was because of this wonderful visit. And so they signed this accord, and this also supposedly helped put off World War I. That eased the tensions a little bit, and they acknowledged international policies and fears of influence in the Pacific. And they also pledged to support and respect the open door policy in China. So this was something good that happened from the visit. Now their next stop was Amoy, China, and Amoy was the port that was off the Formosa Straits, and it was a Chinese island. And the Peking government was so excited to welcome the 16 battleships, but only half the battleships came, and they were very embarrassed. And in order to not lose face, they told the people that half the ships were wiped out in the typhoon. And this is the third and final leg of the journey. They're going back to Hampton Roads at this time. So, the next place, does everyone know where Ceylon is?
Sri Lanka.
Yes, very good. Yes, it's called Sri Lanka today. And they went to Sri Lanka and had a wonderful time there. See them arriving in Colombo. And all the people enjoyed their visit as well. And they got to ride an elephant. They also rode a train up to the capital of Kandy. And then they went via the Suez Canal. And then some of the ships got to go to Egypt. This is them going through the canal. And so what I've done here now, the rest of it is different ships went different places. So I just put what ships went where. But it's fascinating because they actually got to see the pyramids. They got to ride camels. Then they went through Port Said. It was another port where they could coal up, where they had the coal. And while they were en route, there was a enormous earthquake and a tsunami that hit Messina, Italy. And so Admiral Sperry received word of this quake, and of course the Navy's goodwill cruise became a reality. And Sperry ordered the ship Caloga, and that was carrying hundreds of tons of food, and the tender Yankton that had Navy surgeons on it to head toward Messina so that they could help the victims there. And then they were followed by Connecticut and Illinois. But they were there also to see if they could locate the U.S. Consul Arthur A.S. Cheney and his wife. But by the time they got there, it was too late, and they were underneath. They at least were able to recover their bodies. They were underneath all the burns. And it was rainy, but they didn't care because they were just happy to be there. There was a 21-gun salute. And one of the sailors said, quote, unquote, "We hit Hampton Roads on Washington's birthday, and it was raining. But by golly, we celebrated with hardtack and sow-belly dinner that day." And then later, all the deckhands had to go to Washington and parade in the snow for the new president coming up President Taft. These poor sailors. Okay, so with only 2 weeks left in the White House for Roosevelt, he just did declare that this was the most important service that he rendered for peace. The sailors had some fun times, and they had some sobering times. But, according to, in the words of one sailor, it all seemed a sort of dream to me now that it's over, but nevertheless, the cold fact remains that I have been to Cairo and have stood upon the Sahara Desert while the pyramids built over 40 centuries ago gazed down upon me. So whatever the significance of the world cruise for U.S. international relations and whatever the significance for the Navy as an institution, the young sailors that joined the Navy at that time literally did see the whole world, and it was really a voyage, truly a voyage of a lifetime for those young sailors.